He raised his arms amid the smoke and debris of the pit and the shattered bodies of his opponents. No Cybertronian could oppose him. Megatron was destined for great things. Soon, he would no longer be a gladiator. Soon, he would lead the gladiators. He strode victorious out of the pit and into the complex of abandoned maintenance tunnels below a factory that had once churned out components for semi-autonomous mining machinery. Now, most of the subterranean space in the factory complex was given over to the illicit but highly profitable gladiator tournaments. Gladiator mechas and Cybertronians lived, trained, fought, and were repaired here. The ones who died were turned into useful scrap. Until perhaps an orbital cycle ago, all of this had been under the control of a syndicate of crime bosses who ran the gladiators like machines. Who was to know or care? The caste that produced workers in the factories of Chaon was beneath the notice of the higher castes. As long as raw materials were turned into finished goods, the engineering and government castes never spared a thought for their fellow Cybertronians who slaved in the refineries and smelters. The criminal syndicate took advantage of this in a number of ways. One was the creation of the gladiator circuit. Another was the manipulation of results in that circuit. Megatron had chafed under the control of the bosses for some time. Things came to a breaking point when they came to him one day offering a deal. "You're the finest gladiator we've ever seen," they said. "A real immortal. But the stands aren't as full. They won't be, as long as everyone knows you're going to win." At that point, in a room much like the one he stood in now, after a match much like the one he just fought in, Megatron had known what was coming. "We need someone else to win," the bosses said. "Not every time, but once or twice, starting next time you go into the pit." It had been a moment of the sort that comes along only once, perhaps, in a sentient being's life. The moment, Megatron reflected, when you decided whether you were going to surrender control to someone else or fight to the death to keep it. He had decided to fight. Moments later, the bosses and their strong-armed bodyguards were in pieces, save one. Megatron sent him out to spread the word. The gladiator pits were under new management. Now Megatronus was no longer. Megatron thought of that moment, that transformative moment, as he came into the infirmary and saw Soundwave and Shockwave waiting for him. "Soon you'll be leading more than gladiators," Shockwave said, coming over to examine Megatron's damage. Shockwave was Megatron's pet mad scientist, the kind of mind who would take two critically damaged gladiators and try to make one super Cybertronian out of them. He had no ethical sense that Megatron had ever been able to detect, and Megatron did not trust him. But Shockwave was a believer in Megatron, at least for now. There would come a time, Megatron knew, when Shockwave would turn on him. Until then, the Cybertronian genius would be Megatron's most loyal ally. Soundwave was a different matter. Spy master extraordinaire, controller of a horde of minicons so small that Megatron could crush several of them with a footstep. Soundwave was the only gladiator Megatron had ever fought who had a chance of beating him. They had met in a match to first wound rather than death. Otherwise, only one of them would still exist. He was nearly as single-minded as Megatron, nearly as dedicated. He possessed a suite of abilities that Megatron very nearly envied, with his multiple transformations and the triple minicons that he contained within his protoform and could eject into combat at any moment. These were Rumble, Ravage, and Laserbeak. Megatron looked around and did not see any minicons. That suited him well. He did not trust the minicons, any of them. He was unsuited to subterfuge, disliked telling lies except when it was absolutely necessary, and would have much preferred to take whatever he wanted on Cybertron by straightforward force of arms. Part of the reason he kept Soundwave and Shockwave close was that he trusted them to remind him when this was not possible. Megatron was mighty. He knew that, but he could still benefit from associates whose abilities complemented his. "Minimal scarring from the acids," Shockwave pronounced. "The energy weapons had little effect. As is typical Megatronus, you emerge from a battle with few signs of ever having been in a battle. Oh, what fascinating prototypes I could create from you. Megatron." Shockwave stopped in mid-reverie, blinking and returning to the real world from his imagined army of Megatron-inspired supermechs. "What?" "You heard the crowd. I am Megatron." Soundwave and Shockwave looked at each other. "All hail Megatron," they said.